The views and opinions expressed in the following podcast do not necessarily reflect those of the producers, the affiliates, or digital platforms hosting this podcast. All content is for the purposes of education, conjecture, and at times entertainment. We promote inclusiveness and diversity. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Into the Deep with Jay Costa.
Welcome to Into the Deep. I'm Jay Costa. I am absolutely thrilled to have this guest back. Today's guest is an author, a jewelry designer, teacher, and speaker. Today's guest is Jaclyn Sanipass. Jaclyn holds a BA in outdoor education and wilderness leadership. We talk about so much in this episode. We talk about everything from what happened following the devastating battle with Lyme disease, her recovery from severe neurological Lyme disease, and how she led women's wilderness retreats for over a decade and achieved what doctors said was impossible. I absolutely enjoyed my conversation with Jaclyn. So, join me as we seek light and journey into the deep with Jaclyn Sanipass. Enjoy. Gosh, I truly appreciate you doing this. If you could, for our listeners and our viewers, would you mind sharing who you are and what it is you do?
Yes, I knew you were going to ask that. And of course, I'm not prepared, but no, who I am, I think, the biggest thing, I am a mom. I'm a mother. I have a 7-year-old who's almost 8, and she keeps me very, very busy. And so, I spend a lot of time with her playing and doing things outdoors. And she's into fairy princess and mermaid and, all that stuff. So that's a lot of what I do with my time. I grew up in Maine, in southern Maine, and I've traveled around the world and just keep coming back to Maine. It's my home base. And I am married to David Sanipass. He's also from he's from northern Maine, which is about a 6-hour difference, but we both live here in Maine now. And what else? I don't know. What else do you want to know?
Well, I think you have such an incredible story. You have your book out. It's In Your Dreams, and you touch upon some really, personal struggles and with your journey. And I just think that there's so much that people can learn from just how you were able to just navigate through so much.
Oh, yeah. That was a big part of my life, probably about 7 years. I had, growing up in Maine gave my parents a big opportunity to take our family out canoeing and camping. We were runners. My aunts, uncles, cousins, sisters, we go to road races and run. And so that's a lot of what I did growing up, traveling around, camping and running. And ended up going to college for outdoor education. And it was kind of a new thing at the time. I wanted to go to college. I always knew that, but I never knew what for. And as I was picking colleges, there were, what I was looking for, is it close to mountains? Can I go hiking? Can I learn how to snowboard while I'm there? And so that was kind of more my focus. And then I found a school in Vermont that offered an outdoor education program. And I thought, no way, you can actually go to college to, take people outside. So I did that. It was definitely a lot more than I thought it was going to be. It was a full, college education, but it was really good. And then soon after I graduated, I got into some of the programs that I wanted to work for. I worked in Western Maine, Wyoming, Idaho, North Carolina, a bunch of different places. And then when I I wanted to get like a little more, I guess, serious about my work. I spent about a year kind of going to different programs and seeing how they did things. And I got to the point where I became a NOLS instructor, which was really high on my list, the National Outdoor Leadership School. I had gone there as a student. It was excellent. They teach leadership skills, communication, teamwork, and then all the outdoor stuff you could ever want to know and more. And so I had gotten contracts with them. But early on, you don't just get, contracted for the whole year. So I picked up some summer contracts. So my idea was to go and work for an alternative school and do outdoor programming, and then go back to NOLS in the summer and see if I could get more in full time. And so I had just finished a 30-day, it was backpacking and technical rock climbing in the backcountry. It was pretty awesome. Wyoming is incredible. The mountains and glaciers and all that. And I just finished. And so that was my decision. It was probably the end of August. And I headed back to Maine to see my family because I hadn't seen them for quite a while. And I decided to look for an alternative school to work for. That would be, the 9-month school year. And I got a job, and, I said, I'll take it if it's in Maine, but if they offer me on the Connecticut campus, I don't want to take it because I didn't really have any desire to go live in Connecticut. I'd done that a little bit, but it wasn't on my list. Like I like Maine, I like Vermont, I like the mountains, the ocean. Somehow Connecticut just wasn't, But they said, you have a job, you'll be living on our Connecticut campus. I was like, okay, I'll take the job. And I went, and they had a campus in Maine also. So I would go between Connecticut and Maine. But yeah, during that time, I got really, really sick. I didn't know what it was. It was about 3 weeks. And I had gone from really, you need to know your students' names, where they are. And while I was working for the school in Connecticut, we were outdoors cleaning up a camp, doing service work. And I kept forgetting how many students I had. The number changed every day, but I couldn't hold that number. And then I would think, well, did somebody tell me they were leaving? Were they going to the bathroom? And I just couldn't keep track of all the students. And it was a little frustrating. I thought it was a little bizarre. But then I just started having these sweats and just feeling nauseous. And then one day I even forgot how to get to the camp. I was following the bus, not really feeling, 100% following the bus. They had forgot their rakes. So the bus turned around to bring the students back to the school. And then they said they would meet me at the camp. And I started driving, and then I almost had a panic attack because I realized I didn't know how to get to where we'd been going for the past couple of weeks. So a lot of those things started kind of adding up, and it was bizarre, but I kept forgetting that these things were happening. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, I can't do this job. And they sent me to, the head of school to talk about it. Maybe I'm depressed. Maybe I'm not getting enough sleep. Maybe I really don't like Connecticut. Maybe I don't like this job. And, going through all the things, I had no idea what was going on until, I went back to my parents. They gave me 2 weeks off to decide if I really wanted to stay with that job. So they were all about, it was a college prep school, and they were about, putting in your 110% and being your best all the time. And there's no way I could do that. So when I got back to Maine, I figured out what was going on. And that was a huge turning point in my life.
Gosh. And I can only imagine just the frustration you might have been feeling too. Here you are trying to do something that you just absolutely love, and finally you're doing it. And then here's this obstacle that's just somehow presented into your life.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I don't know. It's interesting because I didn't know what was going on, so it affected my short-term memory. So now looking back, I can look back and be like, why didn't I think to do something sooner? But it was like I would have these experiences and then forget and wouldn't be able to recall. Like recalling information was really hard. But yeah, I had when I went back to my parents' house, I was there, and here I'm like, okay, I just graduated college and I'm all ready to, start my career. And here I feel like I'm failing. And it's like the first real job that I had. I mean, I had to wear my best Patagonia and all that. And so I told my parents that I hadn't been feeling good. And I didn't know if I really wanted that job. And I didn't know if I liked Connecticut. And after being at my parents' house, I just went downhill even more, exhausted. Just I couldn't get enough sleep, having nightmares, night sweats, and just spiraled down. So I'm like, I have to call the school and just tell them like I really can't do this. I don't know what's going on. So I called them and I let them know that I wouldn't be able to give 110%. And so I kind of was forced to resign out of that position, and still not knowing what was going on. And it was challenging even to hear from them. Like the head of school told me, "Oh, I thought you would be able to get back on your horse and ride again." Like, they had sent me off, and then I was going to, choose to put in 110% and change everything at that point. But it definitely went a different way. And I had to go down and pick up all my stuff, move out of the apartment, and, kind of just go back to my parents' house. Like, it's only been a year out of college, and here I am back, and I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, and so there you are. You're feeling worse. You're feeling run down. What was that? I guess that turning point to finding out, or how were you able to discover what it was?
Well, that's kind of a longer story because, once I went down to Connecticut, I packed up my car. I had been living in an SUV for quite some time. I drove around all out west and just decided I'd live in the SUV and live simply and explore the world out there. So here I have this small SUV. I got everything I own in it and driving back from Connecticut, going back to my parents' house, and just thinking, like there's got to be more to life than this, and just feeling so, one, not feeling well and feeling tired. And the other thing, like thinking maybe I am depressed and I don't really like this job and just caught up to me. And then like looking at all my stuff and I'm like, do I even really need all this stuff? I mean, I'm pretty simple for most people living, but do I really need all this? Like I had to drive 3 hours to go pick all this up. And now it's like, I'm carrying this stuff around with me. Is it really worth it? Like what's really important? So I started thinking about that on that trip, and got back to Maine. It was my sister's birthday party, and I was having just really strange thoughts. And I didn't go so much in depth in the book on this, but it just like people thought like people will think I'm crazy if they knew what I was thinking right now. And I had a dream. It was like the night before that I went down, that I had gotten in my car, or the little SUV that I had, got on the highway, and somehow I had gotten to a car accident on the highway, and I had died in the dream. And I was looking at the scene, and it was like I was still there looking at everything, but here I had died in this car accident, and the paramedics and fire trucks and everything were there. And I kind of just put it off as just another kind of crazy dream, until I was driving back from Connecticut. I was on the other side of the highway, going north instead of going south. And there was an accident in the same place where I had that dream. It was kind of a common place, just the way that people merge onto the highway. It's not, they've changed it since then, but there was the ambulances, there was the fire trucks, and there was a car that looked like mine. And I started thinking like, oh my gosh, like, am I alive or not? Like, what, did that really happen to me? Like, am I really here? And just like going so far out in the thoughts while I'm driving, I'm still driving the car with all the stuff. And I just decided that if I get back to the birthday party, I thought if anybody could see like ghosts or anything, it would be my sister. So if my sister saw me, but nobody else, then, I would know that I wasn't alive anymore. And then if, the other people saw me, then I would, I'm just a crazy person having all these crazy thoughts. And so this was all going through my mind. And I pulled up to my parents' house and like, here's the test to find out if I'm alive or not. Just, the craziest thinking. And I pulled in, of course, everybody saw me, said hello, and hadn't seen me quite so much over the years. But all I wanted to do was to go to sleep. I just kept getting these like hot flashes and sweating and just not really thinking straight, forgetting little things. And so the party ended, and then I just stayed at my parents' house and just thinking like, this is the most weirdest thing. Like, I don't want to tell anybody, but I do at the same time because it's just not right. And so when I got up in the morning, I went to get into the shower, and my parents have a mirror on their wall. And so I caught a glimpse of something on my back. So I was like, wait a minute. And there's a rash. It was about this big, as a bullseye rash. And
Wow.
so at that point, I'm like, okay, I know exactly what this is. I've heard of Lyme disease before. And so, okay, like this makes sense because, I've heard people having Lyme and they get like sweaty and feverish and crazy and, not thinking straight. So I told my parents that, oh, I think I have Lyme disease. And so they called up the doctor and, I took my shower and then went off to the doctor's appointment. And they confirmed it right there based on my symptoms and the obvious rash. And I think they did a test at that time too. And they're like, okay, so this is, 14 days of, it was 14 days of antibiotics and I'll be back to work in no time. That's what they told me. And so I had like that immediate diagnosis, and that was within 3 weeks. But then it kind of spiraled on into, 7 more years of searching for help.
I can't imagine just that, just the feelings of just finally figuring out what it is, and then seemingly thinking, I'm going to go through this cycle of antibiotics and I'm going to be okay. And then hoping, I would imagine, hoping to just get better or see improvement, and then not seeing that. How did you navigate that? Like, what was?
I don't know. It was just like one step at a time, I think, because, I had that moment where I was like, okay, like relief. I know what this is. This is curable. It's 14 days. And then I started the antibiotics, and then I had a huge reaction to the antibiotics. And well, not like, I don't know. Some people say it's like when the bacteria die off, you get a toxic effect. I don't know exactly what happened, but it went all into like even more crazy thoughts, like, the not knowing if I was here or not, hearing like, it sounded like radio stations of, people talking, but I couldn't quite tune into what it was. And if I heard anybody talking, it almost sounded like they were speaking Spanish or another language that I could almost understand, but I couldn't. And just being like so afraid, just turned into like I don't know, like the biggest nightmare I could ever imagine that I was living. mostly just like in the way that I was thinking and experiencing the world. And then I ended up having the worst headache I've ever had in my life. And my parents brought me to the emergency room. There was also at the time Eastern equine encephalitis that was going around, so they wanted to make sure to rule that out. So luckily I didn't have that. But yeah, in the emergency room, it was just the way I was treated in there was even more, scary. And like I went there thinking I was going to get help and that they would know what was going on and be able to help. But, I found myself in a room, locked in a room with my mom, and had, the hospital clothes on, and they were drug testing me and doing all these different things. And then at the end of it, they just said that I was bipolar or schizophrenic, and I had to go back to my regular doctor. They didn't believe that I had Lyme because I didn't have a positive test when I was in the hospital. I don't think my test had come back yet from the original doctor. And then by then the rash was already gone, because when I took the antibiotics, that cleared that up. So I had no proof that I had been bitten by a tick. I never saw a tick. I couldn't prove to them. So the only thing that made sense to them is that I have mental illness and I'll have to go home and take care of it. And so I left there. I remember, me and my mom had spent the whole night in the emergency room and then in the other room, and going home with these pamphlets and thinking oh man, so now I have Lyme disease and I'm bipolar and schizophrenic. I was all at once, I have all these diagnoses. I just graduated from college. My life is really good. And now this. So it got a lot worse before it got better. So yeah, in that first part, it was I was giving all my attention to what the doctors were saying, because it was nothing I'd ever heard of or experienced before. So I just trusted the other people around me to help guide me to the next step in that healing.
Yeah. And do you find that you were at least led in a positive direction, or do you still feel like, most of that help was still not positive and they were not being helpful?
I think it took about 6 years to find some positive. There were little bits here and there, but I'm fortunate to have the primary care doctor that I had at the time. He actually delivered me, so he knew my family. Wow. I didn't ever really have to go to doctors that much until then. And so when we went to see him soon after, he wasn't on call when I originally went to the first doctor. So it was somebody else. And, he looked at everything and he said, well, knowing you, and this doesn't really make sense. Let's look a little deeper what's going on. So luckily I had him. And he said later that I had the worst case of Lyme that he had ever seen, but also the best recovery. So it was kind of a lot of learning for him as well, because he'd never seen anything to that extent. But, first off, it's well, what do the infectious disease specialists say? Well, first, we did the 14 days of antibiotics. I went through all that. And I didn't get better. So he kept me on for 30 days, which was nobody does that. Right. It was in 2006. And so that was extreme, really, for the time. And then when I did start getting better, they're okay, we'll take the antibiotics off and then I should improve. And I didn't improve after a month or two. So I just started going back downhill again. And so then they sent me to infectious disease specialist, different, specialists that should know about Lyme disease. And that infectious disease specialist, I would never recommend, not for Lyme. I wouldn't go to him again if I had a choice, just because he went so by the book, like what the I forget which organization it is, but they have specific guidelines. Lyme is hard to get, easy to treat, 10 days of antibiotics, and then you're good. So he said I had post-Lyme syndrome. That was the diagnosis that he gave me, and he said you'll be better in 6 months. So after 6 months I go back, same story. He's like, well, just tell me your top symptom. I'm like, well, I'm having all kinds of different ones. Well, what are your top two? And then he'd say, okay, well, yeah, he tests me for every other infectious disease. Luckily I didn't have any of those. That's a lot of testing, and he just said, okay, you're just going to get better. Your body's slower at this. And then after a year, still, I'm declining the whole time. I'm not moving in a better direction. And I think I was even at that time, like, I had weights that I used to wear on my ankles when I run, and so I was putting them on my legs and laying in bed and trying to do a few like leg lifts, and then I'd be like exhausted and go to sleep, and then switch to the other one. And the longer it went, I think the more discouraged I got. And because it's just like you just wait around till your body gets better. I don't know what kind of advice that is.
Right.
And so after a year, they sent me, I forget who referred me to a neurologist. And I went to that neurologist. I had the spinal taps, I had MRIs. Nothing was really conclusive. They were trying to see if I had Lyme in my spinal fluid. It wasn't like a negative, it wasn't a positive. So they just didn't know. And so he tried working me. He gave me Adderall to see if it would help my attention. That just made me so sick. It made me awake and I could do things. But then after 3 days, I just crashed. My whole body hurt. And it's like, this is not the way to go. Can't just like jump start myself.
Right.
And yeah. And then after a while, he's the one. I don't actually remember all the different timing on everything, but I had him, and then I had a neuropsychologist do a test, and what he found was, trouble thinking, recalling information. I scored pretty poorly on some of those memory tests and motor skill tests, like fine motor skills. I could walk pretty well. I only bumped into walls and doors like on occasion. But between those two, they ended up sending me to neuro rehab. They said, well, maybe what happened, you had Lyme, and it caused some sort of like a brain injury from the Lyme, and now you just need to recover from that injury. So I started neuro rehabilitation. At this point, I was so tired. I was just like going from my bed, down to the bathroom and back up, just crawling. I was so exhausted. And they, put me in this neuro rehab. I think it was about 2.5 years. And after a while, I'm doing these memory tests, learning strategies so that I could get through the day, and just so I could figure out how to get to my doctor's appointments. And when I couldn't drive, they took my license away because I didn't have the cognitive ability to drive. And it just was not the greatest time of my life. But all those people that were doing the therapy, they're like, this is really curious, because usually if somebody has a brain injury and then they start this rehab, then they get better. And I was like, I'd get a little bit better with the strategies, and then I would, get worse. My memory would get worse. I'd get slower. So, they were questioning what was going on, because it wasn't what they were used to seeing.
Right.
And, so I'm hearing that. I'm getting frustrated because I'm doing all this therapy and I'm not getting anywhere. And then around the same time, that neurologist said, hey, like he even shut the door in his office, just left it open a crack. And he said that because I was still seeing the infectious disease specialist, he said there's other people out there that have different treatment protocols and understanding of Lyme and co-infections. And I don't know if you want to consider that, but what you're doing isn't working. And as a neurologist, I can't really help you at this point. And then like, okay. And I think that was the last time I went to him. But then I started looking for, oh, maybe that gave me a little bit of hope. Like maybe there is another way. Maybe I'm just going down this dead end.
Wow. And so were you able then to find somebody that could give you exactly what you needed? Because to go through this struggle, and then, it sounds like you weren't in any state to be this author and this amazing jewelry maker at that point. So how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, that is interesting because I couldn't read at the time, and I could barely hold a pen or pencil to write. So I didn't do much of that. I was mostly laying in bed and looking. My sister had got me a calendar, Alex Gray. I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Gray.
Yes, very much so.
And they're really interesting. But I had a calendar on the door, and I could lay in bed and I'd look at the images and just think like, what if looking at some kind of, image like that, because some of them are the body's nervous system, all the different systems, and then like the light system around you, and kind of like he has one that's the universal, forget what it's called, matrix or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I just look at those pictures, and of course I would look and then I forget, and I couldn't even listen to music. It's the hardest thing to even explain, but I just couldn't track my own thoughts. Like I didn't know what I was thinking about, or I would think about something like half a sentence and then lose my place and couldn't find my way back. So for a long time, I was just laying in bed, looking at those images and thinking, I can't wait to see the next one. So you have a whole month to lay in bed and change the next calendar. And then my sister would say, hey, your calendar's behind. I'm like, oh, shoot, I've been laying here for a month waiting to change that. It's like I'm behind. So she'd change it for me so I could look at the next image. But yeah, I think what got me through was the inability to recall what was going on. Even the pain, like I couldn't remember. It'd be like so painful, but then I'd forget. So I think, when I was doing that, which is basically nothing, I started thinking, I'm 26 years old and I'm not contributing to society or to my family, or I wasn't like, what's the point of even being here? I'm just laying in this bed and I can't talk with most people, or I can't even do my own laundry or cook for myself at that point. Like, what's the point of even being here? And then it's like, well, nobody would notice, I bet, if I just if I left, because I haven't seen any of my friends. I couldn't even talk on the phone with them. It's like, if I just disappeared, I bet nobody would even notice. And so I was going to that, like convincing myself. And I remember at some point just being in such pain, like the headaches were so bad that I just was like, I just want to leave. I want to get out of this body. Just ditch this whole idea. This is bad idea, like doing this whole thing. So, because at this point still, they don't know what's going on with me. They said it's not Lyme. So they were still testing for everything else that I could have. Some of the doctors were telling me I'm either making it up. I'll have to learn to live like this. There's nothing they can do. They've done all they've done. So this was like the, the point where I was like, okay, I'm done and I can't take this pain anymore. And I just had some dream that I just came out of the body. So I came out of all the pain and everything, and was talking with some voice or something that somehow gave me the idea that this was all my choice. Like I could be here if I wanted to. If I died, then I would have to come back. And so then I was imagining like being in a toddler body again, and just how cumbersome and awkward, and you can't like communicate well. And just seeing that, or like re-experiencing what that would be like, I was like, nope, okay, yeah, this is way easier. I can do this now. And like somehow that experience or that dream gave me enough to like come back and start fighting.
I love that. I absolutely love that. It sounds like there's this connection with some spirituality there as well too, and also feeling this like it's that determination to really put that mind, body, spirit into focus to try and get through it. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Gosh.
It was with a decision, I think that's kind of like the first step. Or just, knowing that it is up to me. It's not up to anybody else. It's not up to the doctors. It's not up to my parents or, my sisters or anybody. And, but then like, what do I do? I was in my bed, right. Still in all the pain.
Right.
And it's like, here we go. All right. So I made the decision, and, I don't know at what point, like how long after, but I decided to write a letter to this disease and thank it. I thought if I changed the way that I was looking at it, then maybe, my situation would change. So I wrote this gratitude letter, and I sat there and thought about it, like what, kind of like mad, like what could I be grateful about the situation? There's nothing. I can't believe I'm even trying to do this. But then, thinking like, well, hey, I don't have to work at that job I didn't like. I don't have to be in Connecticut. I'm here, I have the opportunity just to start something completely new, because I had just emptied everything out. My car got repossessed. I didn't have health insurance. And just like at my parents' house. And so like, there's not too much worse that I could get, lucky that I had parents to take care of me. But so I just started looking at, the small things like, hey, I'm still here. I'm breathing. I can look at this art, and I have a family that's taking care of me. And so I ended up writing the letter. And even that was hard, because I had to, like, I remember trying to write with a pencil, and I just couldn't control my arm that well. So just to like scribble it down. And then once I felt like it was complete, I don't know how long it took me, it might've taken a month or so. And then when I felt like it was complete, I remember going downstairs to my parents, and I was like, okay, I've got this. I'd like to read this to you. And then, they're all ears, and I read it to them, and then my mom's crying, and my dad's like, doesn't cry too much, but he's got the little, sitting there with his arms crossed, and just because it was hard for them to see, that going from very active and outgoing and athletic to I could barely read and write. So after that, I ended up typing the letter. Somebody, or my uncle, gave me a computer. So I typed it up and I printed it out so it could be read. And I was still in neuro rehab at that point, and they had like an art show. So I'd been in like art therapy and trying to paint to get my motor skills back. But I didn't have any paintings to put in the show. So they said, well, why don't you put the poem? And so I wrote out the poem, or I printed it out, I framed it, and I hung it up. And then, people wanted to like purchase the, the framed poem, and because they worked in like nursing homes, and it just gave me a lot. People responded to it around me. They said it was really helpful for them. And, having that interaction helped me even more. And yeah, so that was, I guess, one of the many steps that it took to get out of that. That was
Wow.
probably halfway in. Yeah.
Gosh. And so do you feel like it was a series of events that were similar to that kind of, I guess, energy exchange where people were responding to your story and you were able to share some of that? And did you feel like you progressively got better?
Yeah, it was kind of up and down. Sometime around that time, I remember calling, like my mom actually was a pretty big advocate, and she talked to everyone at the grocery store and at work and wherever she goes, telling about my situation and looking for people who had Lyme that could help. And so that's what she had been doing, trying to find people that actually healed from it or had found some relief. And so I talked to somebody who had had it for 30 years. They had it in the 80s when it was really not known at all in Maine. And my mom would actually do most of the talking and listening because I couldn't really keep track of the conversation, but she'd write down notes or, doctors or different ideas. And after talking to a few people, I remember there was one woman she was a professional dancer in New York City, and she had gotten Lyme and was so sick she was in a wheelchair. And she had been going to an acupuncture clinic in Yarmouth that was near where my parents lived, and we knew somebody who worked at the office, and so somehow they connected us, and my mom helped facilitate the conversation. But that girl was just like finishing up her treatments and going back to dancing. So she had been in a really tough situation in a wheelchair and unable to walk, but she was able to get to a place where she was going back to dancing professionally. Wow. And so she told me that, the biggest thing you have to have is you have to have hope. And so I'm like, okay, well, that gave me more hope because I could see that she could do it. And if she could do it, then I knew that I could. So she gave me different things, what she did for diet changes and, like alternative medicines like acupuncture and what worked for her. Everybody that I talked to did say, all the symptoms are different. People experience it differently. What works for me might not work for you. But I was like, I'm just going to try everything.
Right. At this point, you might as well. Right.
Yeah. And at the same time, I had called one of those doctors that somebody had mentioned. And it was months later, like I had left a message and, a lot of the places were just so busy. There was only 3 doctors at the time that practiced under those different guidelines in Maine. And it was pretty controversial. So, you call and they're not taking new patients or they've got 2-year waiting lists, stuff like that. Right. So I had left a message, and at one point, months later, my mother tells me, somebody's on the phone. They're from this doctor's office, and her name was Angel, which is really funny. It was like an angel called from this doctor's office. But he was a naturopathic doctor. His wife had Lyme for 8 years before it was diagnosed. And then she was treated for 8 years and she got better. So they had like personal life experience with, Lyme and the co-infections. So once I went into his office, I remember my mom bringing me, and he just said that, I was slurring in the way that I was talking. I could barely walk or stand up straight. My mom was holding me up and just sitting there. And he said, do you want to get better? I said, yes, I do. And then he said, do you believe you can get better? And I said, yes, I do. Because, I'd seen other people do it. So now I have that belief. And he said, well, then I can help you. And he just said that, he can only do what he can do, but really it's up to me. And so that kind of message is, consistent through the people that were able to help, were like, hey, wake up, it's up to you. You got to do this. It's nobody else. But he ended up diagnosing me with Lyme that never was cured. And also I had Babesia, which is another, is a blood parasite that was, like sometimes if you're bit by a tick, there's so many different like viruses and fungus and, different things you can get apparently, but I hadn't been tested. I've been tested for 2 others. Infections, but not that one. So I think I was with him for about 2.5 years. He did prescribe antibiotics. I didn't have enough money to do, they had an herbal protocol and things like that, but my insurance could pay for the antibiotics. So that's what I had to do. But he said that in the state that I was in, that I had to do something. It wasn't just, the disease was already winning. My body was losing at that point. So he was big help, like in the medical field. And he also worked with my primary care doctor. And he had some other specialists that he worked with, other traditional osteopathic medicine. That was, bizarre. I had never experienced that before. But he specialized with people with vision problems and brain injury. And he helped, I had a lot of visual stuff, vision therapy, but he helped a lot. And they connected me with another like acupuncturist that worked a lot with people that had Lyme, vision therapist who worked with people with MS and brain injuries. And now he works with people with Lyme because he saw like what I experienced. And now like people would come in with symptoms and it's like, I always wondered because they never had a brain injury or, these other things. So they wondered what was going on, but that's become one of his specialties now. So it's interesting. So, and that's just in the medical realm. I had to look at everything, physical, mental, emotional, found some really interesting people and
That's awesome. I'm grateful that you were able to get through that. I mean, luckily there were some really great people in your life that still were with you and by your side. But ultimately, I think what's also beautiful is the fact that just your strength and you're able to just keep going and have that hope and that belief. And that's so inspirational for people.
Yeah, it's, I remember, thinking that when I got bit by that tick, I was so connected. Like I love being outside, playing in the dirt, like bury myself in the leaves, just, loving all of that. And then once I had that illness for a while, I started moving further away. Like I don't dare to touch the grass. I don't dare to, go anywhere near where a tick might live. And they're pretty common around the coast of Maine, and just walk in the middle of a paved path or like go to the beach. And it really affected, where I felt comfortable being on the earth, which is really pretty limiting. And I remember thinking, I have to get outside and get my hands back in the dirt and do something. And like crawling outside, I get lost going from the house to the mailbox. But I had this little path around my parents' house, and I remember trying to grow like a spaghetti squash or something. But I kept forgetting to go outside, and so I didn't water it too well. And so I got a little one. It wasn't well enough to eat, but it was like kind of representative. Like I can't take care of myself right now. And it's just, hard to take care of this little plant. And that's just, what I wanted to get back to. I kept saying, I want to be resilient. I want to be able to take care of myself. And I'd make up these signs or symbols that I'd see just to make myself feel like I was getting somewhere. Like if I saw a blue heron flying across the sky, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's it. Like I can do this. I don't know why that bird is there to tell me this, but just that reflection and having the little bits of improvement really helped because it was really up and down. Some days it'd be so horrible and I wouldn't be able to get out of bed, or I'd overdo it, try to get back into running. That was a hard thing. I ended up working with a mind body trainer, sports trainer, because I was in bed so long that I couldn't stand up or sit up well. And she was like, oh yeah, well, she could see the muscles that had just deteriorated and helped me a lot to stand up again. To stand up straight was a big deal.
When you put it that way, so many things that we take for granted, right? Things that we don't even think about if we're doing it day to day, and then how quickly something can change all that. And it's something that, you just reminded me of right there, just standing up straight and the challenge that it was in that moment. Gosh. Oh, I give you a lot of credit.
Thank you.
And how were you able to was it during this time where you kind of took up some jewelry making? Was it something you kind of always did before?
Oh yeah, the jewelry. I kind of dabbled in that since I was younger. I think my dad made me a bead loom when I was maybe 10 or 12, somewhere around there. So I used to do that a little bit, but nothing too serious. And I had some bracelets and necklaces, and I just carried them with me and would trade them or sell them or give them away, And then when I got so sick and I couldn't work anymore, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just finished college. I was going to be, this wilderness instructor, and now I can't even get out of bed or sit very long. And I ended up making my mom a necklace because I thought, well, if I'm going to be sick for a little while, I might as well make a masterpiece or something while I'm at it. And so I made her a necklace, and she wore it to work. And when she came back from work, of course, everybody knew I had been sick, so they wanted to support, but she had $250 worth of orders for these bead necklaces. And so I'm like, great. Now I'm exhausted thinking about having to do all that. But I made up the orders, and she brought into her work some of the bracelets and things that I had and sold them all. And then people wanted more. So my mom helped me to start a little jewelry business. And I was doing mostly beadwork then, so it would take a while to finish anything. And then I can't remember when I got into wire, but once I started playing with wire, because I have a love for crystals, I always have, and I had tons of crystals that I collected. I used to, go out and dig in the dirt and look for smoky quartz and fluorite and whatever else I could find. And so I was wrapping those with wire. And then in the neuro rehab that I did occupational therapy. So they helped me to figure out, if I was going to do a show, how I could manage that with my energy level, pain level, and memory. So they made checklists, different ways that I could make myself be successful at one day show. So I think the first show I did was probably 6 hours, and it completely wrecked me. But, I had to figure out I couldn't do math. I couldn't exchange money very well. And it kind of caused me to panic sometimes. Somebody's standing there, you kind of expect some, how to change a 10, give $2 back, but I had to write it all down. I had a calculator. I had to double check it. And so, it was really challenging to be able to do that. And then I think I would be sleeping for about a week after So then we go back and say, okay, well, what worked, what didn't work, what can I do different? And through doing that, and they also had me in like adaptive sports program, and that helped to lengthen my stamina and my ability. So they worked with me with both of those things. And yeah, so then I started doing more and more jewelry. As I got better, I could do more. But it really worked out, because if I was sick for 2 weeks, then I wouldn't have to do anything. It wasn't like I had to be anywhere. But if I had the energy, I could get up and I could work as much as I could. And eventually I, started putting things in local shops, and they sell out and they call me to make more. And so, yeah, it just kind of grew. And I think back then, like 2007, 2008, I was looking online, because it's like, well, if I'm sick, maybe if I sell stuff online, I wouldn't have to sit, at a show for 8 hours, but I could do it more on my own time. So I built my own website. It was pretty simple, and then, people bought things off my website. I started an Etsy shop because I thought it would help promote the website that I built, but Etsy ended up being more popular. So yeah, I've stuck with it over the years, and the better I got, the more jewelry I could do. So yeah.
And you have some incredible work, if I can say so myself. I just absolutely love just your wire work is impeccable, and the choice of even the crystals or certain semi-precious stones that you use, it's just really, really well done.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. And so what led you to say, I'm going to write a book? Was it your idea, or did someone encourage you because you have such an amazing story?
When I had that dream, there was kind of like a clause in there that said if I did get better, then I would share my story. So it was kind of like a promise that if I can do this, then I'll share this in case it can help somebody else. So that was in there. And I can't remember. I started kind of sharing a little bit. I went down all the different like healing paths and modalities, and like whatever helped somebody else, I tried it, and some of them probably didn't help too much. Some of them might have helped because I just felt like I was doing something. And I think one of the biggest ones that I dove into, I ended up studying in Peru. I studied some of the energy medicine teachings, and a lot of that is just like changing the way that you're thinking and looking at the world. But through that study, they talked about storytelling and sharing your experiences so other people can gather knowledge from that. And so I was trying to do that, being in a lot of different circles and sharing. And then people started inviting me to different events. I started playing crystal singing bowls. That was one of the things that I ran into at the Tucson Gem Show one year. I heard those bowls and it's like, what is that sound? And I found them. And then when I play them, it just did wonders to like my mind and, just calming that craziness, that static that's always there. So I walked out of that room with 3 crystal bowls. I still have 2 because one had a little, accident, but an expensive accident. But I have, I started playing those and sharing those with people just because I felt like, everybody's saying that you should meditate and it's good for your health. But when I was sick, I couldn't even listen to music. But feeling that vibration from the bowls really helped me a lot. So then people would invite me to different events, and I share a little bit about my story and how I got into those. And so then they'd invite me to other places, and they want to know more. And So I ended up doing like slideshow presentations, especially May. May is Lyme disease awareness month. So I usually do at least one or two kind of presentations during that month for awareness. And I don't know. I think after a lot of those presentations, people wanted to buy my book or, where's your book? I want to hear more. And like, I don't have it. I don't have one. I don't think I could write a book. And I don't remember, it was sometime after I met David and got into the STAR teachings that there's something that I was like, okay, I'm gonna share my story. I'm gonna write a book. And I think that he told me you just have to start writing. And it's like, I'm gonna do it. But you like have to actually start somewhere. So it took me a while to get to that starting point. But once I started writing it, it was hard to there's so much more, like so many more stories I can put in there, but what is beneficial for somebody to read and what parts do I think are, important in the bigger story. And then also, I had a hard time reading and writing for a while and had to go through all that therapy. I still have some weird vision stuff. So I did want the book to be easy to read and, like physically. So I didn't use bright white paper. I used a cream color paper and like a bigger type font, not super big, but big enough. And then kind of putting it into simple chapters. So that's, you can read one. Even my daughter, she's 7. She's like, you can't have a chapter that's only 3 pages. I'm like, yeah, I can.
I just did it.
Whatever I want. I did it. But yeah, some of them are, shorter just to get the point across, just because there are a lot of people with like in the midst of Lyme that are reading that right now. So I wanted that to be, available. But once I committed to it, I said, I've got to commit to it, and had a lot of help, a lot of friends kind of, reading over it, because I know my story, but other people don't. So, sometimes there's big gaps that I left out and had to go back and, fill that information in, or, I just had a lot of people locally that helped me out with that. Yeah, that was a journey in itself.
I bet. Writing a book, most people I talk to that have or are authors and have books out talk about it's just such an undertaking in and of itself. Then there's the whole editing process. So I can only imagine.
Yeah. I wanted to keep it like, it's not a technical book. It's more just me telling my story and, the background, how I got to where I was. And so it's written more in story format, so it can be, understood in that way. But yeah, when it went to editing, well, first, some friends read it over and gave me feedback, and, so I could implement that. But then when I chose the editor, it's like, I don't want them to chop up my voice or like to change it around. Like, I understand where they're coming from, but that was probably the biggest, fear that I had, was sending it off and then getting, of course, I'm self-published, so I have that freedom. I can choose to take their suggestions or not. But there's a woman that she's from Maine, and she does a lot for kind of local magazines. So outdoor magazines. So she had some great input and connected me with somebody else who had never been outside. So the editor that did my book knew nothing about rock climbing, backpacking, which ended up being perfect because, there's parts in the book where she's like, what is this? Like, what is a cam? I'm like, oh, okay. So I'll explain that a little bit, like not, not thinking about those little details. But she did really good just trying to, keep my voice and like how the story goes, but asking for more clarification if she didn't have it. And, helping the sentences. I would like to write really long run-on sentences. So she was good at kind of pointing those out and helping me to write those so that they're, easier to understand.
Right on. Well, that's awesome. And what else do you have that you're doing? What do you have coming up for folks to check out some of either your jewelry or some events that you're involved with?
I have jewelry kind of all the time online or, in the local shops in Maine. Really what I've been focusing my time on is the STAR teachings and community building. So, and helping David quite a bit. We have a lot of events coming up, so that keeps me super busy. We have storytelling events in Maine. Since COVID has kind of shut everything down, like our big thing is being together in person, building community that way, listening to each other in person. It's a huge difference than whatever we have going through the microphones and the delays. We miss a lot of the information that's being shared. But Maine is back again, opening up different events. So we have one Friday, April 1st. But we're also offering now live stream so that people can still view if they can't come in person. There's still restrictions on different event spaces. So we're kind of doing hybrid things now. So storytelling event, Celebrate Sound. David's been practicing his dance moves, so I don't know what I'm going to do. But it's going to be fun, storytelling, sharing ancient stories, but also weaving in the teachings into that. And then we have two others, May 5th and May 18th. Those are both in Portland, storytelling events. So, and then of course we have teas that are circles to help us understand the STAR teachings. Those are put on by community members. We have a pretty big community base here in Maine. So Saturdays, Wednesdays, they're trying to get as many teas going as they can, especially in light of, what's happening in the world. The more we can be together and practice the teachings of kindness, compassion, and happiness, I think the better that we all will be.
So well put. Yes, it's definitely the path we should always encourage others to be on. So I'm grateful that you and David are doing your part in helping all of us. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
And where can folks find you on the internet?
Oh, geez, I have.
I know.
I have a website, jaclynsanipass.com, that kind of points to, the jewelry and books and things like that. And then I'm co-owner of Ancient Echoes with David and also our friends Tina Ironbird and Sherry McCullough, and that's ancientechoes.org.
Awesome. And for those listening in and tuning in, you care to elaborate on what Ancient Echoes is doing?
Oh my gosh, we might have another hour to go.
Oh gosh, all right. Well, we'll maybe have to do another episode, which I'm down with. Amazing.
That would be awesome. Yeah. I can give a brief overview. Ancient Echoes is it's an organization, so it has a bunch of different parts. We have a lot of projects that we're working on. So some of those projects are to help David share some of those ancient stories and technologies. So we have a water machine project, some lodges we're building, the teas and community and STAR teachings as part of that. And we've been working to put a lot of the teachings online that haven't been online before. So, recordings of David speaking just to give access to more people. And I guess those are our biggest projects. We just released a second message that was translated David's been translating a message from space since 1977. He received that. And we had a Mi'kmaq teacher, Joan Melier, on Zoom a couple of weeks ago to share in Mi'kmaq and English that message. So we're working on getting that into a form where everybody will be able to hear that. So those are a few of our projects.
That's awesome. And folks can find information to maybe see future Zooms at that website as well?
Yep. Everything's on ancientechoes.org. There's lots of tabs and buttons on there.
Awesome. Lots of goodies on there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I strongly encourage folks to definitely check that out as well. And we'll definitely put all the links in the descriptions and in the podcast, in the bottom of the video as well, too, just so folks can help find it a lot easier. And definitely want to encourage people to go to these events, these live events, when you do have them. So like you were saying, you and David have that for that storytelling, so that people can feel that voice resonate and really feel that connection in that community.
Yeah, thank you.
And there you have it. I can't thank Jaclyn enough for being on the show and just sharing such personal stories. Jaclyn has a lot of courage, and she shares more details and goes into depth in her book, It's in Your Dreams. So be sure to check that out. We've got it in the links below. You can find Jaclyn at jaclynsanipass.com, where she's got links to her books and even her jewelry. And her jewelry is fantastic, in my opinion. Be sure to find her on Instagram at Jaclyn Sanipass Jewelry. If you're listening to the podcast, take a moment and rate it. We are a new podcast, so you rating it actually helps us. And if you're watching, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below and let us know your thoughts. Can't thank you enough for joining us on this journey. Sincerely enjoying every step of the way. So until next time, take care of one another and keep thinking for yourself.